First contact with fear. The quantum communications array at Luna Base 1 sparked to life for the first time in its existence. Dr. Sarah Chen stared at her instruments in disbelief as the impossible signal repeated itself, a transmission that couldn't have originated from Earth or any of humanity's nascent colonies. After 15 years of scanning the stars for signs of intelligent life, first contact was happening during her shift. But this wasn't the triumphant greeting humanity had hoped for. The message, once decoded, contained only terror. To any civilization receiving this transmission, we are the Concordiate, an alliance of 17 spacefaring species. Our worlds are falling. Our technology fails us. The swarm consumes everything. Static interrupted the message before continuing. Mechanical plague unlike anything we've encountered. Our quantum shields mean nothing. Our plasma weapons are useless. They adapt too quickly. 11 billion lives lost. Please, if anyone receives this, help us. Within hours, the UN Security Council convened an emergency session. Admiral James Rodriguez, commander of Earth's small but proud defense fleet, stood before the assembled leaders. The holographic projection of the alien distress signal played again, its desperation filling the chamber. The signal originated from a system approximately 40 light-years from Earth, Rodriguez explained. Our quantum physicists confirm it was sent using technology far beyond our current capabilities. These aliens, this Concordiate, clearly possess technological advancement we can barely comprehend. And yet something out there has them terrified. Finished Chinese Premier Liu, something their advanced technology cannot stop. Dr. Chen, invited to present her analysis, stepped forward. The message mentions adaptation. Whatever these machines are, they learn from each encounter, evolving their defenses to counter any weapon used against them. The Concordiate's technological advantage became their weakness. Their standardized, highly advanced weapons were easy for the machines to analyze and counter. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity, with its relatively primitive space fleet, might actually stand a better chance against these machines than the far more advanced Concordiate. Our ships still rely heavily on railguns, nuclear warheads, and electromagnetic warfare, Rodriguez continued. We never fully abandoned primitive kinetic weapons in favor of energy-based ones. Our technology is diverse, redundant, and often intentionally analog. We might be able to help, or we might be inviting our own destruction, countered the Russian representative. We barely have interstellar capability. How can we fight an enemy that defeated civilizations far more advanced than our own? The debate raged for hours until finally, UK Prime Minister Bennett raised her hand for silence. Perhaps that's exactly why we must help. We're looking at this the wrong way. Our primitive technology might be exactly what's needed. These machines learn to counter quantum shields and plasma weapons, but when was the last time they faced a good old-fashioned tungsten rod accelerated to relativistic speeds? A slow smile spread across Admiral Rodriguez's face. Or electromagnetic pulse weapons, or tactical nuclear devices, or any of the obsolete military technology we still maintain. President Garcia of the United States stood. We can't ignore this. Not just because these aliens need help, but because if we don't stop these machines out there, they'll eventually reach us here. Better to fight them on our terms, with allies, than wait for them to come to Earth. I have a suggestion, Rodriguez said. We recently completed our most advanced destroyer, the U.S. Artemis. She's small by our standards, but she carries every weapons system in our arsenal, from high-tech to primitive. More importantly, her systems are intentionally segregated and redundant. No central computer network for an AI to hack. We can send her as proof of concept. If our weapons prove effective against these machines, we can help the Concordia adapt our technology to their ships. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would answer the call for help. Within days, the U.S. Artemis, under the command of Captain Maya Santos, prepared for humanity's first interstellar combat mission. As she stood on the bridge, watching her crew make final preparations, Santos reflected on the irony of the situation. Humanity had always assumed first contact would involve beings far more advanced, teaching them the ways of the galaxy. Instead, humanity's primitive technology might be exactly what an advanced alien civilization needed to survive. The Artemis's engines flared to life, pushing the destroyer out of Earth orbit. Humanity's first interstellar warship carried with her the hopes of not one, but many civilizations, and perhaps, Santos thought, a reminder that sometimes the old ways were the best ways. As they accelerated toward their jump point, Santos addressed her crew. We carry with us humanity's greatest strengths, our diversity of approach, our refusal to abandon useful tools just because something newer comes along, and our stubbornness in the face of impossible odds. Let's show the galaxy what humanity can do. The U.S. Artemis vanished into FTL, leaving behind a blue Earth still coming to terms with its new place in a much larger and more dangerous galaxy. The next time the destroyer emerged from FTL, it would be to wage war against an enemy that had never encountered anything quite like human ingenuity and determination. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, not as students, but as teachers. And their first lesson would be one the machines would never forget. The old ways. First contact between the U.S. Artemis and the Concordiate fleet happened in the shadow of a red dwarf star. Captain Santos watched as the massive alien vessels dwarfed her destroyer, their crystalline hulls refracting starlight in breathtaking patterns. The contrast couldn't have been starker. The Artemis' utilitarian dark gray hull, bristling with radio antennae and kinetic weapon ports, next to the elegant alien ships that seemed to be built from solidified light. Their flagship is hailing us, Lieutenant Park reported from communications. They're using quantum channels, but I've managed to patch it through to our systems. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a being that looked like a cross between a mantis and a jellyfish. Its translucent body pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that the ship's AI translated as a form of auxiliary communication. I am High Commander Sextil of the Concordiate Defense Force. The alien spoke, its words automatically translated. We honestly didn't expect anyone to answer our distress call. Especially not. The alien's bioluminescence flickered with what the AI suggested was diplomatic uncertainty. Especially not a species as technologically limited as us. Santos finished with a slight smile. That's exactly why we're here, Commander. I'm Captain Maya Santos of the Earth ship Artemis. We think our limitations might be exactly what you need. The next several hours were spent exchanging information. The Concordiate scientists and engineers, led by Chief Researcher Valon, could barely contain their horror as they reviewed the Artemis's specifications. Physical projectile weapons, nuclear fission devices, radio wave communications. Valon's translator somehow managed to convey their incredulity. These technologies were obsolete before my species achieved spaceflight. And your computer systems, they're not even quantum-based. That's right, Lieutenant Commander Chen, the Artemis chief engineer, replied. We use a combination of digital and analog systems, intentionally segregated from each other. Multiple redundancies, hardwired controls that can operate independently of our main computer. But why maintain such primitive technology? Another alien scientist asked. Quantum computing is infinitely more efficient. Energy weapons are more precise. Quantum communications are instantaneous. Because we learned something important during our own technological development, Santos explained. New doesn't always mean better. Sometimes the old ways have advantages precisely because they're simple, reliable, and hard to counter. The conversation was interrupted by a proximity alert. The swarm had found them. 3 machine ships detected, Tactical Officer Jackson reported. Similar size to our destroyer. They're scanning us with quantum sensors. Now you'll see why we keep the old ways, Santos said. Battle stations. The alien observers watched in fascination as the Artemis crew operated with practiced efficiency. Instead of the automated response they were used to, they saw humans manually operating weapons, coordinating through voice commands and hardwired communications. The machine ship's approach, their silver hulls shifting like liquid metal. Energy weapons blazed from their surfaces, the same quantum-based weapons that had proved so devastating against Concordia ships. But the Artemis didn't try to dodge. The energy weapons struck her hull, and nothing happened. Hull plating holding, Chen reported with satisfaction. The ceramic metal composite is dispersing their energy weapons just like we thought it would. They can't get a targeting lock either. Our ECCM systems are too primitive for their quantum sensors to interpret. Time to show them something they haven't seen in a few thousand years, Santos ordered. Fire main railgun batteries. The Artemis shuddered as her main weapons fired. Tungsten rods, accelerated to a fraction of light speed by electromagnetic rails, crossed the space between ships instantly. The machines, adapted to defend against energy weapons, had no defense against simple kinetic impacts. The first rod punched straight through one ship's hull, its kinetic energy converting to heat that melted everything in its path. Direct hit, Jackson called out. Their adaptive shielding isn't designed to stop physical projectiles. Launch nuclear missiles, Santos commanded. Let's see how they handle good old-fashioned atomic fission. The missiles streaked across space, their primitive radio guidance systems ignored by the machine's quantum defenses. When they detonated, the electromagnetic pulse from the nuclear explosions wreaked havoc on the machine's delicate quantum circuits. In less than 5 minutes, 2 machine ships were destroyed, and the third was retreating, its liquid metal hull struggling to maintain cohesion. The Concordiate observers stood in stunned silence. Impossible, Valon whispered. We've lost entire fleets to single groups of machine ships. How? Sometimes the best solution is the simplest one, Santos replied. Your technology is amazing, but its very advancement made it predictable. The machines learned to counter it. But humanity, we never put all our eggs in one technological basket. We kept the old ways alongside the new. And now you can teach us how to fight back. High Commander Dixtel finished. The Concordiate has much to learn from Earth, it seems, starting with the value of these primitive weapons of yours. As the Artemis crew began damage assessment, Santos couldn't help but feel proud. Humanity had just proved its worth to the galaxy, not through advanced technology, but through its stubborn refusal to abandon what worked, no matter how old-fashioned it seemed. The war against the machines was far from over, but for the first time in years, the Concordiate had hope. Sometimes, it turned out, the path forward required taking a step back. Operation Blackout. News of the U.S. Artemis's victory spread through the Concordiate fleet like wildfire. Within days, engineers from 17 different species swarmed over the human destroyer, studying its primitive weapons with newfound respect. But Captain Santos knew they hadn't won the war. They'd barely begun to fight. The machines will adapt, she explained during a strategy session with High Commander Dixtel and the combined fleet's senior officers. Not to the weapons themselves. You can't really adapt to a tungsten rod moving at relativistic speeds, but to our tactics. We need to strike at their core systems before they can develop countermeasures. Lieutenant Commander Chen pulled up a holographic display of the sensor data they'd gathered from the destroyed machine ships. Their quantum processors are their weakness. They rely on advanced computation for everything: navigation, weapons, even their liquid metal hulls. Take out their processing centers, and the rest follows. But their main processing nexus is here. Valon indicated a point deep in machine-controlled space, protected by their largest concentration of ships. Even with your weapons, a direct assault would be suicide. Santos smiled. Who said anything about a direct assault? Lieutenant Park, show them Project Blackout. Park activated another hologram, showing modifications to the Artemis systems. We're going to turn our greatest weakness into our greatest strength. The machines ignore us because our technology seems primitive. So let's be really primitive. The plan was audacious. The Artemis would shut down every advanced system, running purely on backup analog equipment. No quantum emissions, no digital signatures, not even standard radio. Just like a submarine in Earth's oceans, they would run silent, run deep. "Your ship will be effectively blind," one of the Concordia tacticians protested. "Without quantum sensors, how will you navigate?" "The old way," Chen explained. "Stellar navigation, passive sensors, thermal imaging. The same techniques we used before computers. The machines are so advanced, they've forgotten how to look for simple things." The next week was spent preparing. Concordia engineers helped install improved heat sinks and radiation shielding, while the Artemis crew drilled in manual operation procedures they'd never expected to actually use. Every crew member learned to operate their stations without computer assistance, using paper charts and manual calculations. Finally, the day arrived. The Artemis powered down its main systems, becoming little more than a shadow in space. The only sounds on the bridge were the breathing of the crew and the scratch of pencils on paper as they plotted their course, the old-fashioned way. Like a World War I submarine crew, Santos mused quietly. Running silent through hostile waters, they slipped past the first machine patrol without being detected. The quantum-based sensors of the machine ships swept right past them, looking for energy signatures that simply weren't there. A second patrol passed within visual range, their liquid metal hulls gleaming in starlight, but the Artemis's dark hull and cold engines made them virtually invisible against the backdrop of space. Passing the outer defense perimeter, Park whispered, though there was no need for whispers in space. Old habits died hard. Tracking 3 capital ships ahead, using passive thermal imaging only. The crew had trained for this moment. Every calculation was done by hand, every targeting solution plotted on paper charts. They had one chance to strike before the machines realized they were there. "Multiple contacts," Jackson reported from Tactical, his voice barely above a whisper. "Reading massive thermal blooms ahead. That has to be their processing nexus. All hands, this is the captain," Santos said softly into the ship's analog intercom. "Prepare for nuclear launch. All weapons, plot firing solutions manually. We'll only get one shot at this." Through the bridge viewport, they could see their target. A massive structure that pulsed with quantum energy, the central brain of the machine fleet. Around it, machine ships moved in precise patterns, their sensors searching for advanced technology that might threaten their nexus. None of them were looking for a ship running on technology thousands of years old. "Range optimal," Jackson reported. "Manual targeting solutions complete. All weapons show ready on hardwired systems." Santos took a deep breath. They were about to wake up a hornet's nest. Launch all nuclear missiles. Fire rail guns at designated coordinates. Full spread. Without digital guidance systems, without quantum targeting, the Artemis's weapons relied on pure ballistic trajectories calculated by human minds and logged on paper. Missiles streaked from their tubes, their simple radio guidance systems invisible to quantum sensors. Rail guns thundered, launching tungsten rods with devastating kinetic energy. The machines never saw it coming. The first signs of their attack were the nuclear detonations that engulfed the processing nexus. EMPs from the explosions cascaded through quantum circuits, while kinetic impacts from the railguns tore through living metal like tissue paper. The nexus, designed to defend against the most advanced energy weapons in the galaxy, had no defense against the brutal simplicity of nuclear fission and kinetic impact. Direct hits all across the target, Jackson reported, allowing himself a small smile. The nexus is breaking apart. Secondary explosions indicating cascade failure of quantum systems. The machine ships around them began to move erratically, their coordinated defense patterns dissolving into chaos as their central processing core died. Some simply stopped moving, their liquid metal hulls solidifying into abstract sculptures. Others fired weapons randomly, their targeting systems reduced to basic protocols. "Get us out of here," Santos ordered. "Emergency power to engines." Time to disappear before they figure out what happened. As the Artemis slipped away from the devastation they'd caused, Santos looked at her crew with pride. They'd just struck a killing blow against an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy, using technology that most species had considered obsolete before they reached the stars. The battle wasn't over. There were still thousands of machine ships out there, but they'd proven something important. Sometimes the simplest solution was the best solution. Sometimes to move forward, you had to remember the lessons of the past. The old ways, it seemed, still had plenty to teach the galaxy. Ghost in the machine. The destruction of the machine fleet's processing nexus sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Without their central coordination hub, the once unstoppable machine armadas began to fragment. But Captain Santos and her crew knew better than to celebrate too early. The surviving machines were adapting, developing distributed networks to replace their lost nexus. They're revolving faster than we anticipated, Lieutenant Commander Chen reported during an emergency meeting aboard the Concordia flagship. The holographic displays showed machine ships combining into smaller clusters, sharing processing power. Instead of one big target, we now have hundreds of smaller ones. High Commander Sextel's bioluminescence pulsed with concern. Our scouts report the machines are developing new defenses specifically against kinetic weapons. They're layering their liquid metal hulls, creating shock-absorbing structures. Let them adapt, Santos said, studying the tactical displays. They're still thinking like machines, trying to solve everything with technology. But humanity's greatest weapon isn't our railguns or nuclear missiles. It's our ability to improvise. The new plan was even more daring than Operation Blackout. While the Concordia fleet engaged the largest machine clusters in direct combat, the Artemis would demonstrate another forgotten human tactic: psychological warfare. Psychological warfare against machines. Valon's translator struggled to convey their confusion. These aren't organic beings. They don't have psychology to war against. Everything that thinks has a psychology, Park explained. Even AI. Especially AI. They're logical, predictable, and that makes them vulnerable to illogical actions. The Artemis began a campaign of hit-and-run attacks that defied machine logic. They'd appear in one sector using advanced quantum systems, drawing machine attention, then suddenly switch to primitive technology and disappear. They'd launch attacks that seemed to have no strategic value, only to use the machine's responses to learn more about their new networking patterns. During one particularly bold raid, Santos ordered the Artemis to fly directly into a machine patrol's formation. The enemy ships, expecting advanced electronic warfare, instead found themselves dealing with clouds of simple metal chaff that played havoc with their sensors. While they struggled to process the anomaly, the Artemis launched electromagnetically shielded boarding pods. Boarding parties report successful penetration, Jackson announced from Tactical. Deploying the packages now. The packages were perhaps the most primitive weapons yet. Mechanical clockwork devices that, once activated, began broadcasting simple repeating patterns through the machine's quantum networks. Not complex enough to be blocked, not dangerous enough to trigger defensive protocols, but persistent enough to consume processing power. Like an old computer virus, Chen said with satisfaction as they watched the machine ships start to behave erratically. Sometimes the simplest codes are the hardest to stop. The machine's response to these tactics revealed something crucial about their psychology. They couldn't ignore anomalies, couldn't leave mysteries unsolved. Each impossible situation the Artemis created forced them to devote more processing power to analysis, making them vulnerable to conventional attacks from the Concordia fleet. They're like chess computers, Santos explained to Sextel after another successful raid. Incredibly powerful when following known patterns, but throw something completely unexpected at them, and they waste resources trying to categorize it. We're not just fighting their bodies, we're fighting their minds. The strategy proved devastatingly effective. Machine clusters that adapted to defend against railguns found themselves vulnerable to primitive chemical explosives. Those that developed defenses against nuclear weapons were confused by simple kinetic impacts. Every adaptation forced them to sacrifice processing power, making their movements less coordinated, their responses slower. Your species, Hextall observed, watching another cluster of machine ships fall into disarray, has a unique gift for turning weakness into strength. We thought your reliance on primitive technology made you vulnerable. Instead, it made you incredibly dangerous. Santos smiled. Humans learned long ago that true strength isn't about having the most advanced technology. It's about using whatever tools you have in unexpected ways. The machines can adapt to our weapons, but they can't adapt to our creativity. The war was far from over, but the tide had turned. The machines, for all their technological superiority, couldn't match humanity's capacity for innovative thinking. Every victory taught the Concordiate fleet new lessons about combining advanced technology with simple solutions. As the Artemis prepared for another mission, Santos gathered her crew for a briefing. "The machines think they can outthink us," she told them. "They don't understand that human ingenuity isn't something you can calculate. We're going to keep throwing the unexpected at them until they learn that some problems can't be solved with pure logic." The crew nodded in understanding. They'd proven that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its weapons or technology, but its ability to think outside conventional boundaries. The machines might control vast swaths of space, but they were about to learn another lesson about underestimating human determination. "Send word to the fleet," Santos ordered. "Operation Ghost begins at dawn. Let's show these machines why humanity never stopped telling stories about things that go bump in the night." The Artemis disappeared into the darkness of space, ready to haunt the dreams of beings that weren't supposed to be able to dream. The ghost in the machine was about to become very real indeed. Legacy of Thunder. 6 months after Operation Ghost began, the combined Concordiate human fleet gathered for what they hoped would be their final major offensive against the machine threat. The U.S. Artemis, battle-scarred but proud, took its place among ships that now carried a curious mix of advanced quantum technology and primitive human weapons. "Remarkable," Valon observed from their station on the Artemis's bridge. "Every Concordiate ship now carries rail guns, analog backup systems, and nuclear weapons. The machines have lost over 60% of their territory, and they still haven't found an effective counter to our hybrid approach." Captain Santos nodded, studying the tactical display where hundreds of Concordiate vessels arranged themselves into attack formation. Each ship now operated on principles that merged the best of both civilizations' technologies. Quantum computers worked alongside analog systems, energy weapons complemented kinetic projectiles, and crews trained in both advanced automation and manual operation. "The machines are gathering for a final stand," Lieutenant Park reported from communications. "Long-range sensors detect they're consolidating their remaining forces around their last major processing hub. They're doing something we haven't seen before." The tactical display showed the machine ships merging together, their liquid metal hulls flowing into ever larger configurations. What had been thousands of individual vessels was becoming a single massive entity. "They're trying to brute force a solution," Chen analyzed, "combining all their remaining processing power, probably hoping to find some mathematical solution to defeat our hybrid tactics." Santos allowed herself a grim smile. "They still don't understand. You can't calculate your way around human unpredictability." "Signal the fleet. Operation Legacy is go." The battle that followed would be studied by military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. The Machine Collective, a behemoth of living metal spanning kilometers, faced off against a fleet that represented the perfect fusion of advanced and primitive technologies. The Artemis led the first wave, demonstrating how far human combat doctrine had evolved. They no longer relied solely on staying primitive to confuse the machines. Instead, they switched rapidly between technological levels, never letting their enemy predict their next move. "Quantum shields at full power," Jackson called out. "Firing main rail guns. Direct hits. Switching to analog systems. launching nuclear spreads, returning to quantum systems for targeting correction. The massive machine entity tried to adapt, its surface rippling as it generated new defenses. But every time it developed protection against one type of attack, the fleet would switch to another. Energy weapons would suddenly give way to kinetic impacts. Quantum-guided missiles would be followed by simple ballistic projectiles. "They can't keep up," Chen reported with satisfaction. "Their processing core is overloading trying to analyze and counter too many different types of attacks simultaneously." But the machines had one final surprise. The collective entity began to pulse with energy, its entire mass converting into a quantum weapon of unprecedented power. "They're going to try to take us all out in one shot," Santos realized. All ships switched to full analog, shut down quantum systems. The Concordiate fleet responded instantly, each ship dropping to basic technology, just as the machine entity released its energy wave. The quantum pulse, designed to destroy advanced technology, passed harmlessly through ships running on simple electronics and mechanical systems. "Now," Santos ordered, "all ships fire everything. Don't give them time to recharge." The combined fleet unleashed their full arsenal. Rail guns thundered, nuclear devices detonated, and energy weapons blazed. The machine entity, having committed fully to its failed quantum attack, had no defense left against the barrage of mixed technology. Its surface began to break apart, the liquid metal solidifying and cracking. Internal explosions rippled through its mass as processing nodes overloaded and failed. The entity that represented the machine's last hope collapsed in on itself, its remains scattered across space like a metallic asteroid field. In the aftermath of the battle, High Commander Zextol addressed the combined fleet. "Today marks not just a victory over the machines, but the beginning of a new era for galactic civilization. Humanity has taught us that true advancement doesn't mean abandoning the old ways, but understanding when and how to use every tool at our disposal." The Concordiate Council later made it official policy that all member species would maintain capabilities across the technological spectrum. The U.S. Artemis approach became known as the Thunder Doctrine, the principle that unpredictability and technological diversity were the best defenses against any threat, whether machine or organic. As the Artemis prepared for its journey home, Santos looked at her crew, human and alien, working together at stations that merged multiple technological ages into something new and powerful. "We came to help fight machines," she mused, "but we ended up teaching the galaxy something more important. Sometimes the best way forward is to remember where you came from." The old ways and the new working together. That's humanity's real gift to the stars. The destroyer turned toward Earth, its quantum drives humming while analog backup systems stayed ready, a living symbol of the lesson humanity had taught the galaxy. True strength lies not in abandoning the past for the future, but in learning to use both in harmony. Behind them, the galaxy was changing. The age of pure technological advancement was over. The age of technological wisdom had begun, and it had started with a single human warship that dared to fight tomorrow's battles with yesterday's weapons.